bringing COVID-19 to the forefront. Does that make sense? And I say, listen, I really don't want to talk about this, Brad, but they're making me as a licensed insurance agent. I want to make you aware. So I'm not trying to pressure you, scare you in any way, shape, or form. But I'm sure you've heard of the disease COVID-19. Obviously, it's in the news. It's everywhere. And hopefully you have not been exposed. Have you been exposed to anybody currently in the last 2 weeks that you know that has been diagnosed or as COVID-19 has been tested positive for it?
No, I have not personally.
Okay, good. Thank God. Because before, in the last week or so, they didn't ask that question. Now 90% of all insurance carriers, if they haven't asked that question, are going to ask that question. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And if you have said yes to that, you're uninsurable. And we don't know for how long. God forbid you contract the disease. It could be up to 2 years because some of the questions on the applications that we're going to go through today when we apply for your coverage ask you, have you been hospitalized in the last 5 years?
Okay, that's a really good point. That's a very, very good point. People need to understand that they're projecting that by June, 95% of Americans will be exposed to COVID-19.
Well, yeah, I haven't got to that point yet. Right.
So that's a very good point to bring up, that they are postponing applications. Some carriers are postponing applications if you answer yes.
Absolutely. And what's happened is, again, I don't have a crystal ball here, and I'm not trying to frighten you or scare you, but I got to make this well known to you that, you know, if you've been hospitalized or God forbid you got it, it could be up to 2 years before you can even apply for coverage again. And sometimes in cases up to 5, depending on the carrier. Now, the carrier I'm working with you today, they're not asking that question. So even if you have been exposed or know somebody, we're still okay. And, you know, are you familiar with how the insurance carriers work, Brad, at all in terms of mortality rates and actuaries?
No.
Okay. Actuaries are just a bunch of group of smart people that sit down and look at the risk and mortality rates. And mortality rates is the rate of people dying. Now, I hope this doesn't happen, and I'm not a big news watcher, but you kind of saw where they're talking about this curve that's coming up in the next 2 to 3 weeks. Does that make sense?
Yep.
And they've also projected that I think there's about 5,000 people who've passed away, and they're projecting, God forbid, 100,000 to 250,000 people could potentially die, and up to 70% of the people are going to be exposed to that virus, which is, I have a lot of business now, but I can see that kind of tapering off because most people are going to be exposed to the virus. And if that's one of the questions on the application, we're not going to be able to help those families. So again, I don't know what this is going to look like, and I certainly hope that this doesn't happen. And I guess I'll just ask you a question. If insurance rates are based on the mortality of how many people are dying, and this does happen, do you think the rates are going to be going up or going down?
Going up.
And again, I don't have a crystal ball, but here's what the insurance carriers are allowing us to do today, which is pretty awesome. They're allowing us to put a price lock on this, no matter what happens in the next 2 to 3 weeks, based on anyone who applies today. So if you apply today and tomorrow the mortality rates go up, you're locked in at the price we talk about today. If we apply and we get this application through and it goes through as if you're covered, guess what? You apply, you're locked into the price that we have today. Does that make sense, Brad?
Yes.
So no matter what happens, so maybe we talk about it and you want to get less coverage. We want to at least get you something, you know, to Mike's point, at least get you something put in place so you can do it. So it doesn't matter if it takes 2 to 3 weeks for this application to get approved, and God forbid we have this outbreak and mortality rates go up and insurance carriers skyrocket and you get infected by COVID, or you're around somebody who tested positive that you used to work with, or a nanny, a babysitter, someone at the grocery store you're at, whatever the case may be, they can't go back and say, well, now you're going to pay higher prices because you were able to apply prior to that happening. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And that's kind of, I do that for my opening now. So that's kind of what I've kind of put together for an opening. So I put it out there, and I feel I've done it in a way where it's not threatening, but their brain goes, holy bleep, I think I need to make a decision today. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I don't want to be caught on this end of the cycle over here.